The big meeting room was quiet when Kim Tae-ho stood up from his chair. His old hands held tight to the smooth table that looked like glass. For 30 long years he had spoken for all humans in this place. He had watched many alien races laugh at human problems and act like they did not care. Today felt different. Today was the day when all humans had finally had enough. The tall, bug-like creature from Valthar made clicking sounds with its mouth parts that meant it was laughing. The thing had huge eyes that showed many colors from the lights in the room. It spoke through a machine that changed its bug sounds into words that others could understand. The mammals are getting upset again, it said. Maybe they need to wait another 100 years before they can think properly. Park Jin-woo was young and worked as Kim Tae-ho's helper. He sat in the seats above and watched his teacher get more angry. The human towns far away from Earth were dying. Bad guys with spaceships kept attacking human supply ships every week. When humans brought proof when they asked for help under space law, they were told to fix it yourself or make better weapons. The vote happened just like always. 47 different alien races voted against humans. Only humans voted for their own idea. Humanity's plan to work together to stop space pirates was said no. Their request to protect trade ships was turned down. Their asking for basic respect for human space areas was ignored with the same mean attitude that had been going on for 30 years. Kim looked around the huge room one more time. He looked into the eyes of creatures that had never thought humans were equal to them. The Korath looked like living crystals. The Nethans lived in gas and wore special suits. The proud lizard like Draxi thought mammals were almost like pets. None of them understood what they had just done. Very well, Kim said, and his voice was heard clearly through the big room. Humanity leaves the Galactic Council starting right now. The words hit the room like rocks thrown into still water, making waves of confusion and dismissive chatter. The Valthar bug thing's mouth parts clicked again. They'll come back in 1 month begging to join again. Humans cannot live without the Council's protection, but as Kim picked up his papers and walked toward the door, something about the way he moved made the smarter aliens stop and think. This was not an angry politician storming out after losing. This was something else completely. This was a choice that had real weight behind it, the kind of weight that came from an entire species saying enough. The room had been the center of galactic power for over 1,000 years. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy came here to make deals, solve problems, and decide the fate of billions of beings. The walls were made of a special crystal that could show the home worlds of every species that belonged to the Council. Today, those walls showed Earth a blue and green planet that looked small and unimportant compared to the gas giants and crystal worlds of other species. Kim had first come to this room as a young man full of hope. He believed that humans could find their place among the stars through diplomacy and cooperation. He had watched his hair turn gray and his back bend while trying to make other species see humans as worthy partners. Instead, he had spent 3 decades being treated like a child, asking adults for permission to sit at their table. Human colonies scattered across the outer edges of galaxy were struggling. Every day brought new reports of attacks on human ships. Human families trying to start new lives on distant worlds were constantly under threat. The pirates who attacked them used weapons and ships that came from Council species. Everyone knew it, but when humans brought evidence, they were told it was not enough proof, or that humans should handle their own problems. Park Jin-woo remembered the day 6 months ago, when the colony ship New Hope had been destroyed. All 3,000 people on board, including many children, had died when pirates blew up their ship. The pirates had broadcast the attack live, showing the faces of human families in their final moments. When Kim had brought this recording to the Council, the Draxi representative had said that space was dangerous and weak species should stay home if they could not protect themselves. That was the moment Park had seen something change in his mentor's eyes. Kim had served humanity with patience and dignity for 30 years. He had swallowed insults, listened to lectures about human inferiority, and continued to believe that reason and justice would eventually win. But watching those families die while aliens dismissed their deaths as unimportant had broken something inside the old diplomat. The Council chambers could hold representatives from over 200 species, though only the major powers had permanent seats. The others came and went as their influence rose and fell. Humans had been given a permanent seat 20 years ago. not because they were respected, but because they were useful. Their ships could go places other species found too dangerous. Their soldiers could fight in conditions that would kill most aliens. Their scientists could solve problems that stumped even the ancient Koreth. But useful was not the same as equal. Humans were tools to be used when convenient and ignored when their needs conflicted with more important species. The Valthar controlled most of the galaxy's information networks. The Draxi owned the biggest weapons manufacturing companies. The Koreth had technology that was thousands of years ahead of everyone else. The Nethans could travel through gas clouds that blocked other ships. What did humans have that could not be replaced as? Kim walked through the corridors leading away from the council chambers. He passed portraits of famous galactic leaders. None of them were human. The greatest peace treaties, the most important scientific discoveries, the most celebrated military victories all belonged to other species. Human achievements were footnotes in galactic history, mentioned only when they served some other species. Purpose Park caught up with his mentor as they reached the transport bay. Kim, this is really it, isn't it? We're actually leaving. Kim looked at the young man who had dedicated his career to serving humanity in the galactic community. Park had grown up, believing that humans belonged among the stars, that they could earn respect through hard work and good intentions. He was about to learn what Kim had known for years, that respect could not be earned from those who refused to give it. Yes, Park, we are leaving, Kim said as they boarded the ship that would take them back to human space. But we are not running away, we are going home to prepare. Prepare for what? Park asked. Kim looked out the window as the council station grew smaller behind them. For 30 years he had watched other species dismiss human concerns, ignore human suffering, and treat human lives as worthless. He had seen the casual cruelty with which advanced civilizations treated those they considered inferior. But he had also seen something else. He had seen fear in alien eyes when humans did things that should have been impossible. The galaxy thinks it knows what humans are, Kim said quietly. They think we are weak because we ask for help. They think we are stupid because we believe in fairness. They think we are harmless because we follow their rules. But they have never seen what humans become when we stop asking for permission. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying the last human diplomat away from the galactic capital. Behind them, the council continued its session, making decisions that would affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. None of them seemed to realize that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had pushed humanity too far, and now they were about to discover what happened when the most dangerous species in the galaxy decided to stop pretending to be civilized. Park stared out at the stars and wondered what would come next. The only thing he knew for certain was that the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months passed and the galaxy barely noticed that humans were gone. The council kept having their meetings. Trade ships moved along the same routes they had used for hundreds of years. The different alien species went about their business just like they always had. If anything, many of the council members seemed happy that the troublesome mammals were no longer bothering them with complaints. Captain Lee Min Ho flew his cargo ship New Sol along the same path he had used for years between human colonies. He was one of the first to notice something strange had happened. His usual trip had become very quiet. The pirate attacks that had made civilian shipping dangerous for years had simply stopped. Not just fewer attacks, but no attacks at all. The Draxi Trade Commissioner Velkith did not worry about the reports at first. Pirates were wild and unpredictable creatures after all. Maybe they had found better targets to rob, or maybe the weak human prey had finally learned to avoid the most dangerous space routes. It was not until his own ship started disappearing that he began to feel worried. The first missing ship was called Crimson Scale, and it was a Draxi merchant vessel carrying rare metals from the outer edge of the galaxy. It vanished without sending any emergency calls, without leaving any wreckage, without any trace at all. The second was a Koreth science ship studying gravity near human space. Then a Valthar diplomatic ship disappeared while carrying secret messages. Between two council species, Ambassador Yoon Da-un had taken over Kim's job representing humans to other species. She started getting more and more frantic messages from her old colleagues' species that had spent decades ignoring human complaints, were suddenly very interested in talking. They wanted to know what humanity was doing in their claimed territories. They wanted explanations for the missing ships. Most importantly, they wanted promises that humans were not responsible. But Yoon's answers were always the same and very frustrating. Humanity is no longer a member of the Galactic Council. We do not have to explain our actions to foreign governments. If you have concerns about activities in human space, we suggest you stay out of human space. The Nethans were the first to demand action. Their gas mining operations on the edge of human territory had gone completely silent. 12 facilities, thousands of workers, millions of credits worth of equipment, all simply gone. When their battle fleet moved to investigate, they found the mining station still there but completely empty. It looked like the Nethans had just vanished in the middle of their workday. In the council chambers, accusations flew back and forth like sparks from a fire. The humans were clearly responsible, but how their technology was primitive, their military was scattered across dozens of small colonies. They did not have the resources for this kind of organized action. Did they? The meeting room that had once seemed so grand and important now felt tense and uncertain. The crystal walls that showed each species' homeworld flickered with emergency broadcasts. Ships missing, entire colonies gone silent. Trade routes abandoned. The galaxy that had seemed so stable and controlled was starting to show cracks. Commander Hyuk Jae-sung of the Draxi Border Patrol had been hunting pirates for 20 years. He knew every trick, every hiding spot, every route they used to escape after attacks. But now the pirates themselves were disappearing. His sensors would detect a known pirate base one day and find empty space the next. No explosions, no battles, no signs of fighting. Just nothing. The Valthar intelligence network had spent centuries building the most sophisticated spy system in the galaxy. Their agents were in every major government. Their listening devices monitored every important communication. Their analysis predicted political changes before they happened. But now their most experienced agents were going silent in areas near human space. Agent Vex Kalar had been gathering information about human military capabilities when his last transmission came through human fleets moving in coordinated patterns. Advanced stealth technology, hiding ship movements, weapon signatures that did not match any known human designs. Then silence, his tracking beacon went dead. His communication implants stopped working, and he vanished completely. The Koreth Council of Minds met in emergency session. Their crystal bodies resonated with shared concern as they tried to understand what was happening. Their science vessels had been mapping gravitational anomalies near human territory when they stopped reporting. Their mathematical minds that could calculate the movement of stars were baffled by the complete absence of data. Elder Crystal. Jarn had lived for over 3,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations. In all that time, species that withdrew from galactic politics usually became isolated and weak. They would struggle for a few decades, then come back begging to rejoin the community. But humans were not following this pattern. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger. The trade routes that connected the major species were becoming dangerous for the first time in centuries. Ships that had traveled safely for generations were now disappearing without explanation. The economic networks that had taken millennia to build were starting to collapse as merchants refused to travel through areas where human space might be nearby. Captain Seo Woo-jin of the human merchant vessel. Prosperity had been making the same trade run for 15 years. She carried medical supplies to the outer colonies and brought rare minerals back to human space. Her ship was old and her weapons were basic, but lately she had noticed something interesting. She had not seen a single pirate ship in over 6 months. Other human captains were reporting the same thing. The space lanes that had been crawling with bandits and raiders were now completely clear. Human ships could travel anywhere they wanted without fear. The colonies that had been struggling to survive under constant attacks were now thriving. But when alien merchants tried to use the same routes, they found very different conditions. Draxi trade ships would enter areas that seemed perfectly safe, only to never arrive at their destinations. Valthar information brokers, who tried to gather intelligence about human activities, would simply vanish. Koreth science vessels studying the changes in local space would send one final transmission, then go silent forever. The pattern was becoming clear to those who looked carefully. Alien ships that stayed in alien space were mostly safe. Alien ships that approached human territory or human interest disappeared. Human ships could go anywhere they wanted without problems. The message was simple, even if no one was saying it out loud: stay away from humans and you will be fine. Bother humans and you will regret it. Ambassador Yoon Da-yoon received a priority communication from the Valthar High Command. They wanted to schedule an urgent meeting to discuss the security situation. The beings who had dismissed human concerns for 30 years were now asking for human help with their problems. Her response was polite but firm. Humanity appreciates the Valthar High Command's interest in opening diplomatic communications. However, as we are no longer members of the Galactic Council, we handle our security arrangements independently. If the Valthar wish to ensure safe passage for their vessels, we recommend avoiding any territories or activities that might conflict with human interests. The galaxy was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. Humans were not the same species that had begged for council protection. They were not the weak prey that could be ignored and dismissed. The silence from human space was not the quiet of defeat. It was the calm before something much bigger and more dangerous was about to happen. And for the first time in galactic history, the predator species were starting to feel like prey. The Draxi Empire made the mistake of testing humanity's resolve. Emperor Karash was descended from a proud warrior bloodline that had conquered 17 star systems. He refused to accept that mammals could threaten his people. He gathered the largest military force in Draxi history, 800 warships carrying the finest warriors his species had ever produced. Admiral Han Seok-jin received their declaration of war with something close to amusement. The Draxi had announced their intentions, their fleet composition, their planned route of attack, and their timeline. They had basically handed humanity a detailed instruction manual for their own destruction. The human response was swift and surgical. While the Draxi fleet moved slowly toward human space, human strike teams were already moving through Draxi territory like ghosts. Military bases went offline, communication networks failed, supply depots exploded in carefully timed sequences that left the Draxi military blind, deaf, and starving. Colonel Kim Yoo-jin led one of the human special operations teams. Her group of 12 soldiers had been assigned to disable the main Draxi command center on their capital world. The mission should have been impossible. The facility was protected by energy, shields, force fields, and thousands of elite guards. But Kim and her team walked through those defenses like they did not exist. The Draxi had never fought an enemy like humans. Their military doctrine was based on honorable combat, direct confrontations, and overwhelming force. They expected their enemies to meet them in open battle with fleets of warships and armies of soldiers. Instead, they found themselves fighting shadows that struck without warning and vanished without trace. Lieutenant Park Jae-won was part of a team assigned to sabotage Draxi supply lines. His job was to make sure the enemy fleet ran out of fuel, food, and ammunition before they reached human space. He had been trained for this kind of work, but even he was surprised by how easy it was. The Draxi had built their empire through conquest and intimidation, but they had never learned to defend against an enemy that refused to fight fair. By the time the Draxi fleet reached human space, half their ships were running on emergency power, and the other half were dealing with internal sabotage. Systems failed at crucial moments. Weapons malfunctioned during combat drills. Life support systems shut down randomly. The proud Draxi warriors found themselves fighting their own equipment instead of human enemies. The battle at Epsilon Station lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Admiral Han did not just defeat the Draxi fleet, she systematically dismantled it, ship by ship. The engagement was broadcast, live across the galaxy, so every species could watch what happened when someone declared war on humanity. Captain Song Hyun-woo commanded the human destroyer, Swift Justice, during the battle. His ship was one of 50 human vessels facing 800 Draxi warships. The odds should have been impossible, but the humans had advantages that numbers could not overcome. Their ships were faster, their weapons more accurate, their tactics more flexible. The Draxi fought like they always had, with courage, honor, and traditional military formations. But traditional tactics meant nothing against an enemy that could predict your every move. The human fleet flowed around the Draxi formation like water around rocks, striking weak points and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Commander Lee Min-ho watched from the bridge of his flagship as Draxi ships exploded one after another. The enemy had superior numbers and heavier weapons, but they were fighting the last war while humans were fighting the next one. Every Draxi move was anticipated, every Draxi strategy was countered, every Draxi advantage was turned into a weakness. Emperor Karash himself led the final assault in his massive dreadnought conquest. The ship was 3 kilometers long, carried enough firepower to destroy a planet, and had never been defeated in battle. But when it faced the human cruiser, New Sol, something impossible happened. The smaller human ship simply ignored the Draxi weapons fire and destroyed the mighty dreadnought with a single shot. The image of Emperor Karash kneeling before Lieutenant Kim Yu-jin became one of the most widely distributed recordings in galactic history. The proud reptilian ruler was twice her size and had ruled an empire for 50 years. But there he was surrendering to a human barely half his age. The message was clear: humanity was no longer prey. But the real shock came when humanity released their prisoners after extracting a simple promise. No more attacks on human space, no more support for pirates, no more interference with human trade. That was all. No tribute, no territorial demands, no humiliating treaties. Just a simple agreement to leave humanity alone. The Valthar Queen was the first to understand the terrifying implications. Humanity was not just militarily superior, they were showing restraint. They could have enslaved the Draxi, occupied their worlds, forced them into servitude. Instead, they had made their point and withdrawn. That kind of measured response required strategic thinking that suggested humanity was playing a much longer game than anyone realized. Species across the galaxy began reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans. The bumbling, emotional creatures who had begged for counsel, protection for 30 years had been an act. The real humanity was something far more dangerous, and they were just beginning to show their true nature. The Nethans tried to test human resolve by blockading a human trade route. Their gas ships surrounded the merchant vessel Prosperity and demanded it submit to search. Captain Seo Woo-jin had been making peaceful trade runs for 15 years, but when the Nethans threatened her ship, something changed in her voice. "This is Captain Seo of the human merchant vessel Prosperity," she broadcast on all frequencies. "You have 60 seconds to clear this trade route, or you will be removed." The Nethan commander laughed and moved his ships closer. Then space around them filled with human warships that seemed to appear from nowhere. The blockade that had seemed so powerful moments before was now trapped, surrounded by enemies they had not even detected. Admiral Park, so young, appeared on the communication screen, her expression calm, but her eyes cold. The Nethans had made the mistake of threatening human civilians, and now they were about to learn why that was a bad idea. "You have interfered with human commerce, threatened human citizens, and violated human space," she said. "Each of these actions constitutes an act of war. Your ships will be destroyed and your crews will be imprisoned unless you withdraw immediately." The Nethans withdrew so quickly, they left half their equipment behind. News of the encounter spread even faster than the Draxi defeat had. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had not just developed better weapons or faster ships. They had become something entirely different. They had evolved from prey animals into apex predators, and they were just starting to hunt. The old council still met, still debated, still passed resolutions that fewer and fewer species bothered to follow. But the real power in the galaxy had shifted to those who understood the most important lesson. Never mistake human patience for human weakness. The Korath tried to negotiate a peace treaty. The Altani requested human protection. The Zelef begged for help against their oppressors. One by one, species that had ignored or dismissed humanity for decades suddenly wanted to be friends. But humanity was no longer interested in friendship with those who had shown their true nature. Respect had to be earned, and most of the galaxy had proven they were not worthy of it. The humans who had once begged for scraps of recognition were now deciding who deserved their attention. The galaxy had spent decades dismissing humanity as primitive mammals unworthy of respect. Now they watched in fascination and terror as those same mammals quietly, efficiently, compassionately reshaped the balance of power among the stars. The hunt had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The answer came from a place no one expected. Dr. Choi Hee-jin was a scientist who studied different alien species. She worked on a neutral research station called Harmony that floated in space between the territories of different galactic powers. While she was looking at biological samples from various council species, she found something that had been missed for decades. Humans were not just another species that had learned to build spaceships. Their genetic markers, their evolutionary path, their brain structure all pointed to something that should have been impossible. They were a warrior species that had learned to be peaceful, predators that had chosen to be protectors. Every human carried the genetic memory of countless generations, who had survived by being the most dangerous thing in their environment. More importantly, they had been holding back. The discovery came too late for the Korath exploration fleet. 57 ships had entered human space demanding answers about their missing trade vessels. They expected to find scattered human colonies, primitive defenses, maybe some hidden pirate bases that explained the recent disappearances. Instead, they found Captain Song Hyun-woo waiting for them. The human fleet that came out of the asteroid fields around Kepler Colony was unlike anything the Korath had seen before. Sleek ships that moved like hunting cats' weapons, that cut through Korath shielding, like it was paper tactics that seemed to know what the enemy would do before they did it. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 14 minutes. When the survivors crawled back to council space, their reports were met with disbelief, then horror, then growing panic. The humans had not just defeated a Korath fleet. They had done it with casual efficiency that suggested this was normal for them. How many fleets did humanity have? How long had they been preparing for this? The answer came from Commander Park, So-Young broadcasting on all council frequencies, from the bridge of her flagship. The transmission showed a woman in her 40s, her face calm and professional, standing before a tactical display that showed human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. There were hundreds of them, esteemed members of the Galactic Council. She began her voice, carrying the weight of absolute confidence. Humanity has received your delegation. We found their curiosity about our internal affairs to be somewhat intrusive. Going forward, any unauthorized vessels entering human-claimed space will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The broadcast continued for 7 minutes, laying out humanity's new position with crystal clarity. They were no longer interested in council membership, council protection, or council approval. They would defend their territory, protect their trade routes, and eliminate any threats to human interests. The days of asking permission were over. Dr. Choi had made her discovery while studying tissue samples from humans who had died in pirate attacks. What she found in their DNA was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They were persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. They were pack hunters who could coordinate attacks across vast distances. They were tool users who could turn anything into a weapon. But most importantly, they were a species that had evolved the ability to make moral choices. They could be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, but they chose not to be. They had spent thousands of years learning to control their violent instincts, to work together to build civilizations instead of destroying them. The humans who had begged for counsel, protection, were not weak. They were restrained. The Valthar High Command called an emergency meeting of their top military leaders. The insectoid creatures had built their empire on information control and technological superiority, but the humans had been operating right under their sensors without being detected. How was that possible? Intelligence Chief Vex Zarin had access to the most advanced surveillance technology in the galaxy, but when she tried to scan human space, her instruments showed nothing. Vast areas that should have contained human colonies, industrial facilities, and military bases appeared completely empty. It was as if humans had learned to become invisible. The truth was even more disturbing. Humans had not become invisible, they had become something else. They had spent 30 years being dismissed as primitive mammals, while secretly developing technology that made them the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their ships could travel through space without being detected. Their weapons could destroy targets from impossible distances. Their soldiers could survive in conditions that would kill any other known life form. Captain Lee Min-ho was flying his cargo ship through what used to be the most dangerous part of the galaxy when he received a communication from a Draxi patrol ship. The lizard-like aliens were demanding to search his vessel for contraband weapons. The same species that had ignored human pleas for protection now wanted to board human. Ship's Lee's response was calm but firm. "This is human merchant vessel. New Sol operating under the protection of the Human Defense Fleet. Any attempt to board this vessel will be considered an act of war against humanity. Please alter your course immediately." The Draxi captain laughed and moved his ship closer. Then something appeared on his sensors that made his blood run cold. 12 human warships materialized around his patrol vessel, appearing from what had seemed like empty space. The Draxi ship was surrounded, outgunned, and completely helpless. "This is Admiral Han Seok-jin of the Human Defense Fleet," came a voice over the communication channel. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this area, or you will be fired upon." The Draxi patrol ship retreated so fast it nearly tore itself apart from the acceleration. News of the encounter spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The species that had dismissed humans as harmless were realizing they had been sharing space with apex predators who had been pretending to be prey. The humans had not been weak, they had been patient. The humans had not been stupid, they had been learning. The humans had not been harmless, they had been choosing not to harm. The Koreth Council of Minds met in emergency session trying to understand how they had been so wrong about human capabilities. Their ancient wisdom, their advanced mathematics, their thousands of years of experience had all failed them completely. They had looked at humans and seen primitive mammals when they should have seen the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Elder Crystal Jarn accessed the deepest archives of Koreth knowledge, searching for any reference to a species like humanity. What she found made her crystalline form resonate with terror. There were legends among the oldest races, stories of a species that could adapt to any environment, survive any threat, overcome any obstacle. The legends called them the Eternal Hunters, and said they would one day inherit the galaxy. The descriptions matched humans perfectly. Meanwhile, in human space, President Yang Mi-rae was addressing the Colonial Assembly from New Geneva Station. The woman who had once been a junior diplomat was now the leader of humanity's response to galactic politics. Her words were broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. "My fellow humans," she began, "we have spent 30 years trying to earn respect from species that were never going to give it to us. We have begged for protection from beings who saw us as amusing pets. We have followed rules written by creatures who considered us barely worthy of notice. That time is over." She paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry her words to millions of humans across the stars. "We are not leaving the galaxy. We are taking our rightful place in it. We will defend our people, protect our interests, and ensure that humanity never again has to ask permission to exist." The broadcast ended with footage of human fleets moving through space like schools of metallic fish. Their ships were beautiful and deadly, their formations perfect, their purpose clear. The galaxy had spent decades dismissing humanity as irrelevant. Now they were about to learn what happened when you underestimated the most dangerous species that had ever evolved. 1 year after humanity left the Council, the galaxy had been completely transformed. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now secure, patrolled by human ships that appeared and disappeared like phantoms. Species that had grown wealthy by exploiting others found their operations disrupted by surgical strikes that left no evidence except missing prophets. The Council itself was falling apart. Without a common enemy to unite against, old rivalries came back to the surface. The Koreth accused the Valthar of cheating in trade deals. The Nethans demanded territory from the Draxi species that had seemed like allies for thousands of years, suddenly remembered why they had distrusted each other in the first place. President Yang Mi-rae addressed the Human Colonial Assembly from New Geneva Station, outlining humanity's new role in galactic affairs. They would not seek to conquer or control other species, but they would no longer tolerate being ignored or dismissed. Human space was sacred. Human citizens anywhere in the galaxy would be protected. Human interest would be defended by any means necessary. The transformation was remarkable to see human colonies that had struggled to survive under constant threat now. Flourished trade flowed freely along routes secured by the human fleet. Exploration missions pushed into regions of space that had been too dangerous to enter. Just months before, Captain Lee Min-ho had seen the change firsthand. His cargo ship, New Seoul, now carried passengers as well as freight families who had been afraid to travel between human worlds, were now booking passage on regular flights. The space lanes that had once been hunting grounds for pirates were now safer than the streets of most alien cities. More importantly, other species began to take notice. The Altani were a peaceful race that had suffered under Valthar oppression for generations. They sent a quiet diplomatic mission to human space. The Zelef, whose homeworld had been devastated by Draxi mining operations, requested human assistance in ejecting the occupiers. One by one, species that had been ignored or exploited by the Council began looking to humanity for protection. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho now served as humanity's first Minister of Galactic Affairs. He found himself busier than he had ever been during his council days. But instead of begging for scraps of recognition, he was negotiating mutual defense treaties, trade agreements, and technology, exchanges with species that saw humans as potential allies rather than amusing primitives. The Altani delegation arrived at New Geneva Station, led by Elder Counselor Mira Selen. Her people had blue skin, large eyes, and delicate features that made them look fragile compared to most galactic species. They had been trying to gain independence from the Valthar for over 2 centuries, but had always been too weak to fight back. "We have watched what humanity accomplished against the Draxi Elder," Selen said during her first meeting with Kim. "We know that you could easily defeat the Valthar forces that occupy our world, but we also know that you do not conquer for the sake of conquest. We ask not for conquest, but for justice." Kim studied the alien diplomat across the table. The Altani had never supported human requests in the council. They had voted with the majority every time. But they had also never actively opposed humanity, and their current situation was genuinely tragic. "Humanity does not make war lightly," Kim replied. "But we also do not ignore injustice when it is brought to our attention. If the Altani people truly desire independence, we can provide assistance. But understand that this would mean permanent alliance with humanity, not temporary convenience." The negotiations took 3 weeks, but the result was the first formal alliance between humanity and another species. The Altani would receive human protection in exchange for exclusive trade agreements and basing rights in their territory. When the Valthar learned of the alliance, they immediately began withdrawing their occupation forces rather than face human retaliation. The Zelef situation was more complicated. Their homeworld had been strip-mined by Draxi corporations for 50 years, turning a beautiful garden world into a toxic wasteland. The Zelef people had been forced to work in the mines as slave labor, while their children died from poisoned air, and Water Commander Park So-young led the humanitarian mission to Zelef Prime. Her fleet arrived to find Draxi mining ships still operating despite the recent defeat of their military. The corporate executives apparently believed that their emperor's surrender did not apply to commercial operations. "This is Admiral Park of the Human Liberation Fleet," she broadcast to the mining stations. "You have 24 hours to evacuate this system. Any personnel remaining after that time will be considered hostile occupiers and dealt with accordingly." The Draxi mine supervisors laughed at the ultimatum. One human fleet against an entire industrial operation seemed like impossible odds. But 24 hours later, when human marines landed on the mining platforms, they found them completely abandoned. The Draxi had learned not to test human resolve. Restoring Zelef Prime took months of work. Human engineers designed atmospheric processors to clean the poisoned air. Human scientists developed new plant species that could grow in contaminated soil. Human doctors treated Zelef children who had never breathed clean air. The cost was enormous, but humanity paid it without complaint. The final blow to the old order came when the Koreth Collective formally requested admission to what the galaxy had begun calling the human sphere. Their crystalline forms had proven vulnerable to bioweapons that other council species had begun developing, and only human medical technology could save them from extinction. Elder Crystal Jarn, who had lived for 3,000 years found herself kneeling before Ambassador Kim, in the same way Emperor Karash had knelt before Lieutenant Kim Yoo-jin. The proud ancient being who had dismissed humans as primitive mammals was now begging for their protection. "We have been arrogant," she said, her crystalline voice resonating with shame. "We believed our age gave us wisdom, but wisdom without compassion is merely clever cruelty. We ask not for mercy, but for the chance to prove that we can learn from our mistakes." Kim looked at the alien who represented one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. The Kareth had voted against humanity. Hundreds of times had dismissed human suffering as irrelevant, had treated human lives as worthless. But they were also capable of admitting their mistakes, and that counted for something. The treaty that brought the Kareth under human protection was signed in the same chamber where Kim had announced humanity's withdrawal from the Council. As he put his name on the document, Kim thought back to that day when everything had changed. The galaxy had watched in fear as humanity abandoned the table, but they had misunderstood what they were seeing. Humanity had not abandoned anything. They had simply stopped asking for permission to be what they had always been, the most dangerous, most compassionate, most unpredictable species the galaxy had ever encountered. The old council still met in their crystal chamber, but fewer species attended each session. Their resolutions carried no weight, their threats meant nothing. Their promises were worthless. The real decisions that affected galactic civilization were now made in human space by human leaders, guided by human values. Species across the galaxy had to make a choice: align with humanity and accept their protection, or remain independent and face the consequences. The Valthar chose independence and found their empire crumbling as client species defected to the human sphere. The Nethans chose neutrality and discovered that neutrality meant irrelevance in the new galactic order. But those who chose to join humanity found something they had never expected. They found a species that kept its promises, protected the weak, and treated allies as equals. The humans, who had been dismissed as emotional and unpredictable, turned out to be the most reliable partners in galactic history. The galaxy had spent decades dismissing humanity as primitive mammals unworthy of respect. Now they watched in fascination and terror as those same mammals quietly, efficiently, compassionately reshaped the balance of power among the stars. The humans had left the table, but they had not left the game. They had simply decided to play by their own rules, and the galaxy would never be the same.